Week 8 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few defense DST units. Hit off the wire this week. The first one, the Detroit Lions. So the Lions is a 1 week use only. Great matchup coming up versus the Titans. Give up the second most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. And this Lion team, they're playing great football, obviously. 5-1 on the season. Just beat the 5-0 Minnesota Vikings division rival. And now this defense gets to go back home, and they got an easy matchup versus Tennessee offense. So the last few weeks for this defense, week 4 versus Seattle, 27 points allowed, 3 sacks, an interception, a fumble recovery. Week 6 at Dallas, 9 points allowed, 4 sacks, 3 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. And week 7 in Minnesota, it was a shootout between the division rivals, like I mentioned, 23 points, 4 sacks, and an INT. So right now, like I said, out there in tons of fantasy leagues, 81%. A great matchup is a streaming option versus the Titans. And Detroit definitely worth an it this week. The next DST, the Houston Texans. So the Texans out there in 52% of fantasy leagues. And they're another streaming option as well versus the Indianapolis Colts, where their offense has had trouble pretty much the whole season moving the football up and down the field. So the last few weeks for this Houston Texan defense, week 5 versus Buffalo, 20 points allowed, a sack. Week 6 in New England, 21 points allowed, 4 sacks, 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. In week 7 at Green Bay, 24 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, and a fumble recovery. So for the most part, this defense, they're creating turnovers. They're going out there and making plays. I know it was a tough loss at the Packers in week 7, but this week a great matchup with the division rival Colts coming to town. And we know this Texan defense, they want to get back to the winning ways. And this week, I think they could go out there and get the job done. So if you need a streaming defense, they're out there in 52% of fantasy leagues. Next DST is the Green Bay Packers. I've said this a lot this season. Green Bay, one of the better defenses in terms of creating turnovers and getting to the quarterback. And we've seen it pretty much the whole season. I know week 7 was a down game in terms of fantasy points, but besides that, it's been 9 or more fantasy points from week 2 to week 6 for this DST. Week 5 at the Rams, 13 points allowed, 3 sacks, an interception, a fumble recovery, a block kick. Week 6 versus Arizona, 13 points allowed, 3 fumble recoveries in that one. In week 7, like I said, a down game versus Houston, 22 points allowed and 4 sacks. But week 8, a great matchup at the Jaguars. Give up the 13th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. I know Jacksonville went out there last week, scored 32 points in that ball game. But this offense obviously played a weak New England Patriot defense at Jacksonville last week. So I think Green Bay, they could create some turnovers in this ball game, obviously. In this one at Trevor Lawrence, he's turned the football over a decent amount of times this season. And they get to the quarterback as well. We even saw it versus CJ Stroud. He was under constant pressure all game long last week, and he got sacked 4 times. So I think this week they get back on track with a better scoring game is the Green Bay Packers, and they're out there in 53% of fantasy leagues. Next DST is the Los Angeles Chargers. So obviously the Chargers haven't played yet with their ball games here tonight, Monday night versus the Arizona Cardinals. But this DST is a nice streaming option no matter what happens in tonight's game. I like them a lot this week as a streaming option. And with the Saints, I give up the 12th most fantasy points here in week 8. So they got obviously Khalil Mack to get to the quarterback. Jim Harbaugh leading this defense. They're a hard-nosed defense, and they go out there and play hard. And I know the last couple weeks the numbers haven't been great, but week 4 was a tougher matchup versus Kansas City. 17 points allowed, 3 sacks, an interception, a fumble recovery. And week 6 at Denver, 16 points allowed, 2 sacks, an INT, and a fumble recovery. So like I said, tonight's game, we'll see what happens at Arizona. And then week 8, a great matchup versus New Orleans, where I don't know if Derek Carr's going to return. And even if he does, he's not going to be 100% coming off the ribs and the oblique injury. And this Saint offense has been bad over the last couple weeks, especially Olave banged up in concussion protocol, even though I believe he will return in this week's game, and Shaheed out for the season with the knee surgery. So right now, with all those factors against New Orleans, I think Los Angeles is a streaming option, is a good one this week in the 5th and final defense DST. I looked at off the wires, the New York Giants. So the Giants, I know this season a bad year it's been for them, 2-5. I know they're giving up points, but this defense does get to the quarterback, and this week a good matchup at the Pittsburgh Steelers, where they've had trouble scoring touchdowns all season long. I think this New York Giant team on Monday night could go in there and create some havoc and get to the quarterback at times. I know they give up points, like I said. We've seen it all season long, but they do get to the quarterback, and if they just could create a few turnovers, they're a good streaming option this week. Week 5 at Seattle, 14 points allowed, 7 sacks, a fumble recovery, touchdown, block kick in that one. Week 6 versus Cincinnati, 17 points allowed, 4 sacks, a fumble recovery. And then week 7 versus Philly, they didn't have much chances, obviously. 28 points allowed, but like I said, they get to the quarterback a lot leading the league with 5 sacks in that one. So this week 8, good matchup at the Steelers. And this Steeler offense, they don't put a lot of points on the board. So right now, I think this New York Giant team as a streaming option is a good one this week. So that's a few defense DST units I looked here off the wire for week 8 of the fantasy football season.